Good morning. It is the morning of day 3. We set off from Thirlestane Castle this morning. We had a little difficulty with the photography equipment, and I think we soon sorted that out. So we are currently driving about 40 minutes to Paxton House, where I will tell you a little bit about Paxton House. Where do we go through? I think we go through, did we go through Greenlaw? We go through Greenlaw twice today, so hey ho, you'll figure it out. And we get to Paxton and then back through Greenlaw, past Hume Castle to Mellerstain House. And from Mellerstain we go to Louder to get some petrol, and then back to Thirlestane where we went for a little walk through the grounds of Thirlestane and had a chat with the sheep and the horses in the area. So I'll see you at Paxton. So, unfortunately, having arrived at Paxton House, we aren't allowed to take pictures of the interior, so you'll have to settle for the exterior and the gardens. As you can see, Paxton is a Palladian style house built between 1758 and 1766. Patrick and his cousin Ninian commissioned its building and interior design from James Adam. It was originally designed by Patrick to entice his lady love over from Europe, but her parents weren't keen, and he was quite keen. But, anyways, it wasn't to be, unfortunately, as she died, and Patrick never lived in the house as his love for the house died with his love for his lady friend. We saw a pair of her kid gloves that she had given to him as a token of her affections. And then his cousin Ninian did live in the house with his family. And it also has one of the largest collections of Chippendale furniture. The east wing behind that was put up much later. It was put up in 1812, actually. Behind one of the Palladian wings by architect Robert Reed to extend the house and give it a more substantial library and picture gallery. The house was lived in until around the 1980s when John Hume Robertson established a charity so that the house could be opened to the public. And I think him and his wife just found the house far too big for the two of them to live in on their own. We are off to Mellerstain House now, and I will be back to tell you about that. drove in a bit of a square here because we were trying to figure out what the lovely building in the square is, and we are currently in Greenlaw. And it turns out that the building in the square is a war memorial hall. It's a very nice building. I don't know if you get to see it, but that is why we drive in a circle in a square, because we tried to ask a gentleman standing down a garage if he knew what the posh building to the right here was, as we'd driven by it earlier in the day. We were a bit confused as to what it was, but yeah, it's a war memorial hall. So there we go. Castle. I thought I would tell you a little bit about Hume, even though we didn't actually go up the hill to it. We just doodled about in the parking lot. Hume Castle is the heavily modified remnants of a late 12th or early 13th century castle held by the powerful Hume family, who became the Lords of Hume and then later the Earls of Hume or Home. The village of Hume is between Greenlaw and Kelso. Historically, it was used as a beacon to warn of invasion as it has views towards the English border. The 17th century saw the demise of the Hume Castle as a habitable fortress, as the Earls of Hume had already established another seat at Douglas Castle and the Hersal. I guess we'll have to look up what the Hersal is now. Hume Castle finally succumbed, there we go, to the forces of Cromwell in 1650 during the Wars of the Three Kingdoms. Today, the castle is still seen as the spiritual home of the many Humes of Scotland and abroad. The castle was bought by the state in 1929, and in 1985, a restoration program by the Berwickshire Civic Society, funded by the Scottish Office, reopened it to the public in 1992. Okay, I'm sorry. Curiosity got the better of me, and I had to look up what the Hersal was. So we'll tell you about the Hersal very briefly. It is a stately home near Berwickshire and has been the seat of the Earls of Hume Home since 1611. It was the principal seat following the destruction of Hume Castle, which we've seen, during the mid 17th century, and it was the home of former British Prime Minister Sir Alec Douglas Home, the 14th Earl of Home. It is a large mellow Georgian house made of grey stone dating from the 18th century. So now we know about the Hersal, and I'll let you Google a picture of that. It's quite lovely. Then we arrived at Mellerstain House, I think. Anyways, then we arrived at Mellerstain House. They were having a problem with their till. I was trying to buy a guidebook. It was £5. They wouldn't take cash because the till was broken. What a palaver is all I have to say about that. We did the gardens before we did the inside of the house, and I did walk down to the lake to have a chat with the swan. That was quite the hill to climb back up again. Our tour at Mellerstain was about 2 hours with a lovely lady named Leslie. She's actually written a book about Lady Grizelle of Mellerstain, who kept all sorts of accounts for the house. There's notations on how much was spent on clothes and shoes and repairs and servants, and basically, if it happened, she wrote it down. But her descendants weren't as meticulous in their note keeping as she was, alas. So we don't have a lot apparently from certain periods, but that's okay. Look, it's the swan. All right. The older castle at Mellerstain included an old 5-story tower that was ruined in the 1700s and is now commemorated with a little fairy cottage, which you will see a bit later on. The new Mellerstain was built between 1725 and 1778. I will explain why it took so long in a minute. The architect William Annam initially designed the east and west wings for George Bailey with a central block, and George Bailey and his wife, Lady Grizelle, who I spoke about keeping meticulous records, and there was always a middle part planned, but it would be another 45 years before that section would be built. The family lived in the two wings for a time and eventually in 1731 went to Naples, as Lord Binning wouldn't go on his own, and the whole family and servants packed up and went with him to Naples to hopefully cure his consumption, but he only lived another year. It took them 5 months to get from Scotland to Naples in those days over the Alps and things. Ooh, long journey. The wings weren't linked until 1770. A younger George Bailey commissioned Robert Adam to design and build the main mansion house connecting the two wings. There are to this day surviving records of what the original Adam ceilings were to look like, and whenever they're painted, they are continued to be painted the same. I believe it was the 12th Duchess. She got her hands on some pastel paint and she painted over some of the original colors in the marble entry hallway. So those ones don't have their original colors, but the rest do. It is said that it is one of the more complete works of Adam, but who knows? He was very prolific in his creations. So, as he has many houses, Kenwood, Harewood, Newby, on and on goes the list. Interestingly as well, we found out that he only visited properties he was commissioned to work on about once a year. And this one in particular, George told Robert that he was to adhere to a fairly strict budget. So in looking at the ceilings compared to other Adams ceilings, there are less designs to them. The plasterwork is much flatter. It's less 3D. They're less colorful. They are a little bit simpler, just as it is. All right, I will let you enjoy the rest of Mellerstain. There's so much more I could talk about. As I said, Leslie took us through, and it was about an hour and 45 minutes. So you got your money's worth, to say the least, on that one. But we did have an enjoyable day, and then it was back to Thirlestane through Louder. We made ourselves a fry up. We went for a walk and saw some sheep. All in all, it was a really, really lovely, simple day. So enjoy the rest of Mellerstain, and we'll see you tomorrow. Oh, these two rooms are interesting. It used to be the two rooms for the state bedroom, so you'll notice that it's one room with two very different ceilings that Adam designed. And at a certain point, they turned the state bedroom into a smaller withdrawing room so that the ladies had somewhere to go that was smaller and easier to eat. And then the two dressing rooms were turned into one room, and it was turned into the small library because, again, a lot of these rooms were difficult to heat in those days with the fires. And this is the marble entry hall where you can see that the ceiling is much more muted than the rest of the house. And on the left is a portrait of Lady Grizelle Bailey, who kept all the meticulous records. And it's upstairs to the bedrooms, so enjoy.